With the recent news that Scout Motors is now asking for additional taxpayer subsidies here in South Carolina, this conversation with my legislator, Joe White, that I conducted on this channel 2 years ago, deserves a second listen. Long before the headlines, Joe raised serious questions about corporate incentives, rushed deals, and whether massive public subsidies actually serve communities or just powerful interests. So, what you're about to hear is a timely reminder of why these questions matter. If you like this content, please like, hit subscribe, and comment to ensure we have the support we need to revive our republic. Here is the segment.
And I received a text on my phone that showed a picture with your picture superimposed with AOC at Cortez from Brooklyn, representative from Brooklyn, about how you vote with her. And I would say I was amazed, but I know how parties work in this state, but I was appalled that they would actually do that to you. So tell why what was going on.
Let me speak specifically to that text, and then let me go back and explain how all that got started. Okay, so Ocasio-Cortez, whatever her name is, AOC.
Yeah.
Protested Amazon building a plant in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that the government's going to give them $3.5 billion to build this Amazon plant in New York. And she was protesting the government giving money to a big corporation like Amazon to come to New York and build a plant. Well, first of all, AOC was a little bit wrong because that $3.5 million was actually tax credits.
It was billion, whatever it was, but that bunch of money.
That was going to be in tax credits. If you move here, you won't pay this much tax on this compared to other. Okay, it was an incentive by New York to get Amazon to come there. I'm going to go down that trail a little bit because, when they decided not to do that, they decided to build that in Alexandria, Virginia. And just about a month ago, they decided they're never going to open that distribution center in Alexandria. In fact, they're laying off people. So it turns out that all the incentives that Virginia gave them are probably down the tube too. And they've got a big warehouse up there that nobody's using right now. But anyway, that's a different side of the story. So when South Carolina gave a deal to Scout Motors, a division of Volkswagen.
And this was all in the news, it was all heralded as a wonderful thing. Scout Motors, which is an electric car company.
Actually, electric truck company. Off-road vehicle and truck company.
Gotcha.
Okay. Scout, the old International Harvester, tough, bare bones vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Scout Motors announced that Governor McMaster announced that Scout Motors in the state had cut a deal that they're going to build this plant. Scout's going to invest $2 billion in the state, create 4,000 jobs in Richland County.
Richland County?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So.
Oh, yeah, Blythewood.
Blythewood.
Yep.
So when that bill came to the House.
Now, it had already been announced.
Okay. Legislators got a text on a Friday night that there's a big announcement coming tomorrow about a major corporation that was going to locate in South Carolina, and we just need to be aware there's going to be a big announcement on tomorrow. So on Friday night, we get this text. Maybe it's an email. And so on Saturday, Governor McMaster made the announcement that Scout Motors is coming here. So within the next 10 days, the House and the Senate approved and the governor signed legislation to give them to spend $1.3 billion, not tax incentives, cash.
Writing a check to a private company of 1.3.
Only wrote a check for $400 million for them to use any way they see fit for infrastructure, commit another $700 million to build a railroad track over the interstate in Blythewood to get to this property, another $200 million to provide for soil stabilization on this property that they're building. So a total of $1.3 billion in taxpayer money.
Mm-hmm.
So when we had the discussion on the floor, I raised my hand and I said, got a few questions. I said, first of all, do you know what the average cost of a small business startup is in America today? And they said no. I said, well, I've researched that recently. The average cost of a startup of a small business is $50,000. I said, do you know how many small businesses we could create in South Carolina with $1.3 billion? And the guy said no. And the man who's in charge of the Ways and Means was sitting there, and he had a calculator. And he said to the man in the well, it's 24,000. I said, no, it's actually 26,000. I said, but let's go to a typical franchise. I said, a typical franchise costs about $250,000.
Like a Zaxby's, McDonald's, stuff like that.
You know how many franchises at $250,000 we could create in South Carolina with $1.3 billion? He said, no, I never was good at math. I said, well, it's 5,200. So we could create 5,200 small businesses for the same amount of money we're about to spend on a company whose headquarters is in the We Share facility in Washington, D.C. They've never created a car. I said, do you know, you have to ask a question when you're on the floor. You can't just make a statement. You have to ask a question. I said, do you know how long it typically takes to strike a deal like this? In other words, when BMW came here, when Volvo came here, you know what the average time is to strike a deal like this is?
And that's the company looking at the dirt, the due diligence,
right,
controlling the property,
right.
all of that.
He said no. I said 18 to 24 months. That's according to our Commerce Department. It's 18 to 24 months. I said, do you know when we first found out that Scout was interested in putting a facility in South Carolina? He said, well, I think it was in December. I said, yeah, less than 90 days ago. So we've had 90 days to consider the possibility of a brand new manufacturer coming to Richland County, and we're about to spend $1.3 billion. I said, I'm concerned about the due diligence. I'm concerned about whatever the promises are. Other thing I asked, I said, I've read that there were 74 cities that were trying to get this facility. I said, do you know what we offered them that the other 73 did not? And he said, I don't know. I said, well, I just want you to know I have concern. I said, I'm really big in economic development. I believe we need economic development. I just wish that sometime we'd think about maybe putting $200 or $300 million in the budget to create small businesses, to help small businesses come to South Carolina. And so I sat down. So when that bill was voted on, I voted against it. And so within 36 hours, there's this text going out that I'm just like AOC.
Wow. That's astonishing. Good grief. So what did you think when you being a lifelong Republican, being someone that looked at, here's a mechanism to get the type of policies I want to do, and you sit there and see that, what was your reaction when you see this stuff and people calling you going, what is this? I mean, how do you process that?
I wrote a editorial for the Newberry paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I said that a reporter had asked me, what surprises you about being a legislator? Is there anything that you're shocked at? And I said, yeah. I said, we grow up believing and teaching that government in America is of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Mm-hmm.
I've been down here 3 months. I've learned that government is of the powerful, by the powerful, and for the powerful. And they know it. The powerful knows it. They know that us rebels don't have any power. They know we can't get any of our bills passed. They know we can't get any of our amendments passed because they've got the power. I had a constituent call me. She was interested in getting one bill defeated. So I pulled it up, looked at it, and I said, ma'am, we can't defeat this bill. She said, what do you mean you can't defeat it? I said, I've looked at it. The Speaker of the House is a co-sponsor. The head of the Judiciary Committee is a co-sponsor. The head of Ways and Means is a co-sponsor. And the head of Education is a co-sponsor. It's going through. If you want it stopped, you better call your senator because I can't do a thing to stop this bill because it's going through.
What was the bill? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Well, regarding the economic development thing, it's been something that's always bugged me. What's fascinating is the fact that this is part of the tension that's been in our nation ever since Hamilton and Jefferson, right? Mm-hmm. Their big tension there was Hamiltonian sense of investment. The government invest in infrastructure and canals and all of this thing to help grow the nation and that's a legitimate thing to look at, but it is something that has been part of the issue in our nation ever since its founding. And to see, and it's usually been a liberal thing. It was the liberal side of the spectrum who said we need to take tax money and make life better economically. Well, what that really means by the traditional conservatives who looked against that, at least the first 2/3 history of our nation, was you're picking winners and losers. Right. But the powerful has been able to consolidate that, turn it into economic development, turn that into a signpost of conservatism, and has shifted and turned upside down the meanings of everything.
They've tried. There's some of us that still believe what you said originally. The government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers, period.
When I was here, I had my business, Post No Bills, which was a marketing company. And, notwithstanding my long hair and earrings and history before the Navy, I was asked to be on the development board here in Newberry County. I was at all the meetings and making some noise like I tend to do. They said, Mike, we'd love to have you on the development board. And I said, I would love to be on the development board, but know this. If I'm in that room, I will be pushing development projects that spread out development than just one big golden shovel event for one corporation. Because I'd rather see, instead of one company that hires 500 people, I'd rather see 100 entrepreneurs encouraged to come here that can hire 5 people. That stability, that's the way, and it's a lot more quieter, but that's how we build community. And he said, okay, well, that's good to know. I'll let him know. And I never got a phone call back.